This podcast was recorded in the podcast studio at the Great Room Afro Asia in Singapore. Welcome to Greater Encounters by the Great Room, the podcast series where great minds meet and where curiosity meets knowledge. Let's dive right in.
So welcome to Greater Encounters, where great minds meet and curiosity meets knowledge. So I will be curious, you'll be knowledge.
Okay.
I am Sue-Ann Mee. I'm the co-founder of the Great Room, a hospitality-inspired co-working space. Mm-hmm. And today I'm really excited to be chatting with you, Bill Burnett. So for those that are listening in, Bill Burnett is a renowned design thinker. He is the executive director of the design lab at Stanford University. He is also author of this New York Times bestselling book, Designing Your Life, which I've read and I really love. Mm-hmm. So thank you for joining us in Singapore, all the way from California, here in our podcast studio at the Great Room. Thank you, Bill.
That's fantastic. Great Room's a really fun place to be.
Good. We're glad to have you here. So just to kick things off, we have these little conversation cards from the Great Room. I'm going to let you pick one.
I'll pick this one. It says, what is your spirit animal and why? That's an interest. Spirit animal. What's my spirit animal? This is going to sound weird, but in Winnie the Pooh, there's like Pooh, and then there's Piglet, and then there's Tigger, and there's Eeyore.
Yep.
My spirit animal's Eeyore. He's kind of depressed all the time. Or maybe. But
he is, sweet and lovable too.
He's lovable, but Winnie the Pooh is actually probably Winnie the Pooh, like the bear. Yes. Because their bears are curious, and and they like honey. That
would be my husband's too, because his name's Winston. We all call him Winnie the Pooh. So I like Winnie the Pooh. I have a couple other just fun questions I wanted to start us off with, so we get to know who you are before you tell us all about life and fulfillment and everything. What's one thing that most people don't know about you?
Well, you wouldn't know it the way I look today, but I was a pretty good gymnast in high school. I was the Massachusetts champion on pommel horse, and it was the only sport I could do. I was terrible at all the other sports. I couldn't play football. I couldn't play basketball. Couldn't play soccer. I was terrible, but for some reason I could do gymnastics when I was young.
Very mobile and flexible.
I was very flexible. Yeah, now I can barely touch my toes.
Amazing. Who would you like to see in concert? I know you're a music guy.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, Bruce Springsteen rescheduled his concert in San Francisco to tomorrow. And I had to give up my tickets because I'm here to do some other stuff in Singapore. Springsteen's always been a big favorite of mine.
Yep.
The Rolling Stones are touring again, but I think they've just pretty much gone past their expiration date.
I don't know. I saw them last year in Hyde Park, and they're
right energetic.
They were still amazing.
Yeah. So, and lately I've been getting into Ed Sheeran, and I've got all his albums.
He was just in Singapore a few weeks ago.
And of course, I miss Taylor when she was here. But I'm a big Taylor Swift fan.
Okay. Good.
But I'm not going to pay $5,000 for a ticket. that's crazy.
So you span all the decades.
Yeah, all the decades. And and I listen to lots of stuff. I listen to a lot of jazz, Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie. I listen to, I think Eminem is actually this generation's Bob Dylan.
Okay.
I think he's quite a poet, and Dylan and all the singer-songwriters.
Yep. What's your favorite movie?
Oh, we talked about this. So I'm going to say 2001: A Space Odyssey, because I saw it when I was a teenager, and all by myself. I just went to the theater because nobody wanted to see it. They thought it was weird. And that movie blew my mind. And I've seen it again a couple of times since, and it holds up.
Okay.
It's pretty amazing.
Yep.
But the weird one, because we talked about this before, I'll throw it out there. Check out a movie called Buckaroo Banzai, Across the Eighth Dimension.
Buckaroo Banzai.
It was a big budget film. It starred Peter Weller.
Yep.
But check it out. It's pretty interesting.
Okay. What is the most fun product you have designed?
Well, when I first got out of school, I went to Cincinnati, Ohio to work for Kenner Products, and I was designing Star Wars toys. Okay. And a lot of other things. We designed Play-Doh toys. They had Play-Doh. That was the company that made Play-Doh and stuff. But I had an idea for a thing we called the Icky Stick. It was really weird. The lab had come up with this little sort of gelatin-like thing.
Okay.
And if you put it in a tube and you blew through it, the thing would move through the tube, and make a really gross and disgusting sort of farting sound. And I pitched that pretty hard, but it never became a product. But that was my favorite.
My kids would be really into that. I wish it were.
Kids love gross sounds, right?
They love those like little farting balloons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so the gross sounds tube.
Yeah, key stick, I called it.
All right, and what is your favorite Singaporean dish?
Man, your food here is amazing. It's all good. I mean, chicken rice is great.
Okay.
I stay at the same hotel every time I come, and they have like a char siu gao that's like the kind of pork that's marinated and really crispy on the outside. That's really good.
Oh yeah.
We went to a fantastic sort of Asian fusion Japanese place the other day for lunch, which was amazing. So all your food's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Right answer.
It's interesting because this is a place where you can go out to a really fancy restaurant and drop a lot of money. Or you can go get amazing food at a hawker stall for $5, $10 or something. It's nothing. And the food's fantastic.
Cost of living is very expensive here in Singapore, but you're right. We can get really good, affordable hawker food.
Yeah.
And
I hope that never changes because it's really notable. I mean, last summer I was in Beijing, I was in Shanghai, I was in Hong Kong, I was in Bangkok. Bangkok has a street food scene kind of, but nothing like Singapore. Singapore's the best.
Okay. Thai food is also amazing. We have a couple locations in Thailand, so I get to go there a couple times a year and
yeah, well, and see, I live in San Francisco. Stanford is just down the peninsula, so I take the train down to Stanford. But I live in the city, and San Francisco has fantastic Thai food, Japanese food, everything. Because it's a multicultural city.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now that we know a little bit about you, we want to take some of your principles and apply that to us and to our listeners. Mm-hmm. You've inspired countless of people to live their life with more intention and to be more joyful. So maybe give us a little bit of your backstory, like who are you, where you're from, how did you start this at Stanford?
Well, it's all, none of these things are very linear. I grew up in the East Coast, grew up just outside of Boston, and probably everybody thought I would, end up at some Boston school, Harvard or Yale or some East Coast school. And when a nice letter came from Stanford saying, hey, you're in, I thought, well, one, the weather's better, and this is as far away from my parents as I can get. So I just went. I didn't know I didn't know anything about the school. I knew it was a good school. I'd heard something. And then when I got there, it turned out they have the one program in the whole world that was actually a fit for me because I was kind of a sciencey guy, like math and science and engineering stuff, but I was also an artist. I was a painter and drawing, and I was doodling all the time and drawing. And so I wanted to be like an artist that was an art physicist or something, or physics artist or something. And they have a program that actually blends art, physics, engineering, psychology, anthropology. It's called product design. So I took that class, and that changed my life. It was just fantastic.
Yeah.
And then I had a bunch of jobs. I had a job doing, Star Wars toys. I had a job at Apple for 7 years. Was designing. If you ever had what they call a MacBook Pro now, back then that was the first one.
This is a MacBook Pro.
Yeah, we were designing the first MacBooks. That was really fun. I did consulting for a while, but I always was teaching because we like to have practitioners teach design because design's kind of, you got to keep up to date with the new stuff. So I've been teaching for quite a while, but just part-time, just going in, maybe teaching one class a year. And in 2006, David Kelly, who's our senior professor and the guy who started the D School and also started IDEO, the big innovation firm, called me and said, hey, you've been, part-time for a while. Have you ever thought of doing this full-time? Because I need someone to come in and run the undergraduate and graduate program because I'm starting this thing called the D School, which started in about 2005, 2006. And so I took the job. And was teaching classes and, for the design students, teaching, experience design, product design, physical, digital products, all sorts of stuff. We were updating the program a lot because things were really changing in design. And in the last 10 years, everything's changed. And now with AI, it's changing again.
Yeah.
But in 2006, 2007, a buddy of mine, Dave Evans, who's the co-author of the books, in fact. So let's give him a shout out, Dave.
Dave.
And he called me up and he said, hey, I've been trying to help students. He was doing a class over at Berkeley and helping students just figure out how to launch. He said, "Are your students struggling with that?" I said, "Oh yeah, they're smart, but they don't know anything. They don't know anything about jobs or the world or anything. They've been students their whole life." I said, "If we do a class, though, it has to be based on design because that's what it is. We're a design."
And you essentially teach them how to design a life that they want.
Yeah, it's the same way if you think about it, designers learn to design something new to the world, like an iPhone or a new laptop or something. It's never happened before. Can't get any data about it. So how do you invent something that you can't predict?
Yep.
Particularly something that's really novel. Well, we have all these ideas for empathy, understanding users. We have ideas for, prototyping to build our way forward. And it just seemed like, well, the most interesting thing that's never existed before that is going to be innovative and cool is you in the future.
Yes.
But you can't get a lot of data about your future because, jobs only go for a certain distance and then things are changing anyway. And then you decide you don't like that job anymore, or they decide they don't like you anymore. Yep. And so jobs is one thing to think about. And then how do you just navigate into your future in a way that feels somewhat, like you said, intentional? Instead of just letting stuff happen to you and then responding. Or here in Singapore, people are kind of streamed into these programs, like they take some tests and then that decides kind of where you end up in the university or polytechnic system. And then from there, that kind of ends up where you end up in your jobs and things. But when I talk to particularly Singaporeans, they don't feel necessarily a lot of agency in that. Like, I just got to do the right thing and get the next job or get the next promotion, get the next thing. And so, there's been some surveys that you have the unhappiest workforce in Asia.
Yes.
And people are pretty disengaged.
Well, I think one of the things that you bring up is dysfunctional beliefs. Yeah. And I think that that's a huge thing that we face in Singapore. I'll give you some examples. Like if you're not a banker, lawyer, or, if you're not a banker, lawyer, or doctor, you're not successful.
Right.
You won't be able to make money. Or you actually can't be single and over 35 and not have kids. Right. So these are, some of those pressures that traditionally kind of just creep into you and in society.
Yeah. And they're kind of everywhere, and everybody sort of repeats them, or everybody's filling in that story. It's kind of everybody knows that if you're not married and with kids by 35, there's something wrong with you. Or everybody knows if you're in private equity, finance, banking, something, you're not going to make a lot of money. It's like, and it turns out none of it's true. That's why it's a dysfunctional belief. It's not true, and it holds people back because they're measuring themselves against some kind of a metric or a system, or what you like to call KPIs here in Singapore, that actually don't yield. Even if you got all those things, it doesn't yield a life you like, or a life you're happy with, or a life that has some balance in it. Because we're human beings. We don't just work. We play, we love, we do all sorts of other things. Yeah. And so if you're just optimizing around this one path, and it's fragile because you don't get to control necessarily whether it works or not. The companies can succeed or fail. That has nothing to do with you. Banks can grow or shrink. That's nothing to do with you. Yeah. And you may not be kind of temperamentally a banker. Now, you can just work. There's nothing wrong with just saying, I work. And we were talking about in Australia, people work for work jobs and they play on the weekend, and jobs are just for money. And they find their meaning and their joy and their stuff in other things.
Yes.
Perfectly normal, actually. It's kind of a modern idea that your job's going to make you happy. And jobs aren't necessarily set up around your happiness or development or growth. Now, modern companies, we just did a big program with Enterprise Singapore, which is the government group that helps small and medium businesses, thrive. And they're going to use designing your life and some of the tools to help people design really cool careers at Enterprise Singapore, which is great. And because they know that if they can invest in that and people have some agency in their own lives, they'll just be more productive, happier workers. So it's a win for everybody. I'm more happy with my job because I get to define it a little bit. You're happier because I'm more productive as my boss. Everybody wins.
Yep.
But you don't have to get it all from the job. There's money making and there's meaning making, and you might not want to do your meaning making, the stuff you do for love or joy or whatever, on the market's terms. For instance, I'm still an artist. I'm a painter.
Okay.
I've got a studio about 4 blocks from the house, and I've reorganized my time so I can be in Singapore more and also be in my studio more. So I'm only teaching 6 months of the year now instead of the whole year. And I don't want to paint on the market's terms. I don't want to paint, if you want to paint paintings that sell, go to Google and find the top 10 images on Google for this year. And there'll be kittens, right? And there'll be dogs and there'll be babies. Right? And there'll be, cat videos. And And so if you painted pretty kittens and dogs and babies, you could sell your paintings, but who wants to do that? That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to, the method started with my students to help them figure out how to launch and start their careers. And then we started talking to lots of people in their mid-career, and they're 35, 40, and they're like, maybe I got here, I didn't even think about it. I just did what my parents told me to do. And now I'm a banker, I'm a lawyer, or whatever.
Yes.
But it's just never been a good fit. And it's after 15 or 20 years of this, I really need to change. But I don't know how to change. I don't know what to do. It's risky, right? Or they're like, I really enjoyed this career, but the company's changed a lot or the career has changed a lot. It's just no longer my thing. I'm looking for something different.
Yep.
So it doesn't even have to be, that something bad happened, like you got laid off or you crashed and burned. But I think the midlife crisis is more intense if it's the first time in your life where you said, well, wait a minute, what do I really want?
Well, I think that's a good point. A lot of us, in this demographic college is sort of a distant memory for us. Yeah. And college is a time where you look back and you're like, oh, I was so foolish. I did all these things. I experimented. And that's totally acceptable. But then when you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and you have kids, a family, mortgage, and all kinds of obligations, you don't have the courage. You're not allowed to be as experimental. You're not allowed to fail as much. You're judged more. So how do you incorporate some of your design thinking principles for this kind of transition? Yeah.
Well, design, any kind of design, whether I'm teaching people to design products or services or things, or I'm teaching them to design their lives, design starts with empathy. Mm-hmm. So when I'm doing it for customers, I have to figure out, what does the customer need? Mm-hmm. What do they really need? Not what they say, but what they really need. Mm-hmm. When I'm designing for myself, I got to figure out what do I really need? And it might be the first time I've asked myself that question in a while. So we've got a bunch of tools to kind of break that down. And again, our stuff is very designy.
Yes.
It's not, go sit on a rock and meditate and try to find your true path or anything like that. If you want to do that, that's fine. Okay. But our stuff is pretty action oriented. So we do some exercises on our work view and our life view. We do a coherence exercise. Then we build some prototypes based off of that to try little things. The idea of trying is it is risky to take a big change and try to execute it, particularly, like you say, you got to be reasonable. I've got, wife, kids, mortgage, obligations, blah, blah, blah. Maybe you're taking care of your parents if they're getting older. Mm-hmm. So you can't just suddenly quit your job and become a, Balinese dancer.
Yep.
It's not going to work, right? So, but prototyping is the way of trying little experiments to see what might work. Because the other thing I find is that a lot of times people think they start down a path and they think they know they want something, but they've never really tried it. So they don't know.
Can you give us an example of what that would look like?
Sure. A perfect example.
Yes.
It's actually, I think it's in the book. There was a woman who, she was working in tech. She had a nice job at one of the big tech companies in the Valley, but she really liked, Italy. And she would go to Italy every year, and she loved Italian food and everything. And so her dream was to open a little Italian, bakery with a little restaurant attached.
Yep.
So it's going to have, Italian pastries and Italian, antipasti, and then she was going to have a restaurant.
Okay.
And she loved buying, going to Italy and sourcing all this stuff. And she loved designing the restaurant, and she loved, the launch and everything. It was very exciting. Mm-hmm. And then about 6 months later, she came back and she said, I hate this.
Okay.
I said, why? She said, well, running a restaurant, there's nothing like designing a restaurant.
Right.
Running a restaurant is like the staff doesn't show up, and then the orders don't come in, and we don't have any pasta for the dishes, and It's a giant pain in the neck. It's just a big logistical challenge. I never knew it. And we said, Debbie, you could have prototyped this. Why didn't you just you could have spent a weekend working with a caterer. You could have spent a weekend, with a friend who had a little shop and done inventory for her. And you would have realized that your dream of Italy had nothing to do with the actual reality of running a restaurant.
Yes.
She was able to sell the restaurant and go back to doing other things. So that worked out fine. But she, that's a perfect example of, hey, I'm thinking of doing something different in my career. Maybe I should prototype it first to find out what's really involved? Because prototyping is this way of sort of sneaking up on your future. Even if you'd just gone and had a conversation with someone who was running a little deli.
Yep.
Like, what's it like to run your deli? That would have been literally, because that person has been running the deli for 20 years. This is what you'll look like in 20 years.
Yeah.
Go talk to that person. It's time travel, and figure out if that's the person you want to become. And you hear these stories, and it becomes very clear quickly whether you're on the right track or not. And so people don't, they think they have to jump into the fire and go all in, and it's too risky. We don't believe in that. We believe in, the whole second book, Designing Your Work Life, was like, set the bar low, really low. Try small experiments. And that's the way you build the courage to try something bigger. And that's also how you find, like, I have all these students who say, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a doctor. I want to be an engineer. And they come to office hours and go, why? What do you love about engineering? No, I don't know. Well, why do you want to be an engineer? Well, my dad's an engineer.
Yep.
Okay. Other than your dad, have you ever talked to an engineer? No. Well, there's about 100 kinds of engineers. Which one you want to hear?
How do you have those conversations with people? How do you find them, reach out to them, get them to...
Nowadays it's even easier than it used to be, because in the old days you had to actually like call people or stalk them.
Out of the phone book.
People are on, LinkedIn and all these networks and stuff. So it's very easy because the ask is quite simple. I'm not asking you for a job. I'm not asking for anything else. I just want to know your story. Tell me your story. Hey, you're the co-founder of this amazing, startup called The Great Room. Tell me how'd that get going? Tell me your story. And people love telling their stories because it's and
you can see if that identifies with you.
Yeah. And then we have a thing we call narrative resonance. If you have two tuning forks and I hit this one and it's tuned to concert A, this one will start vibrating if it's an A. So if I hear your story and something vibrates in me,
you're on the right track.
I think I'm on the right track.
Okay.
But that means you have to develop your emotional intelligence. You have to hear your own feelings, not what your mom wants, not what your dad wants. You said, well, everybody tells, like, I was working with a woman who's a very successful lawyer, 42, very successful. Went to Stanford, went to Yale, law school, got, the biggest law firm in New York, first woman partner, first woman on the management committee, runs the whole darn thing, $6 million salary, $20 million bonus every year. And she was miserable.
Yep.
Hated it. I said, what happened? She said, well, it was a ladder. And somebody said, that's the next rung. And I did it. I crushed it. I got into the best undergraduate school, the best law school, the best law firm. And I got to the top, and now I'm at the top, and there's nothing here for me. Yep. And I said, well, why can't you change? And she said, no, you don't understand. Everybody tells me I have a perfect life.
Right.
Got the house in Manhattan, got a big place on the beach, got 2 Teslas, the kids in private school. I said, well, I know what it looks like. That's really bright and shiny from the outside, but from the inside, how does it feel? She said, it's horrible. Because she wasn't living her life.
Right.
She was living the life that she thought would look good.
Yeah.
And that's hard because you have to step back and go, well, wait a minute. I'm not a bad person. I just got here without really thinking about what I was doing per se. So how can I slowly unwind this? I mean, it's not, the other thing is like, oh, she has enough money. She could quit her job and not work for 10 years. It would be fine.
Yeah.
But she wouldn't do it because her friends would say, what are you, crazy?
Right,
you had
there's
the perfect
that whole other
life.
stigma of your reputation and feeling judged. And that's very valid and that's very scary.
Big deal. It's a big deal.
But so with the original idea of, okay, what about money? If you had to have the job, you have to kind of make your life commercially viable, you got to keep the lights on. Okay, so you're not going to just quit everything. But let's say this lady that you said she wanted to have her Italian restaurant. She goes and has these prototype conversations. She decides she loves the logistics, the operations of running the restaurant. Now she's like, okay, I need to do a prototype experiment or experience. Right. I am going to maybe work as a sous chef for somebody for a year, and
I'll
then
work
I'm
front
going
of
to
house.
learn.
I'll work front of house for a couple of.
I'm going to open my own restaurant.
Well,
how do you deal with going back 2 steps? Maybe she was a pretty mid or senior level somewhere else, and now she's going to start way at the bottom. There's a lot of putting your ego aside, putting your salary expectations aside, let alone like what your reputation and what people think of you aside. How do you navigate through that?
Well, it's interesting you say start at the bottom. Right? I've started 2 startups.
Yeah.
And I've raised venture capital both times. When you start a startup, It's just three people in a room with an idea.
Yeah.
Are you at the bottom? No, I was the CEO of nobody, of nothing. I had no money, but I wasn't. I never,
I've been there.
I never thought about it being at the bottom. Like when you started this place, it was just an idea.
Exactly.
And probably some of your friends said, what are you, crazy? Right? But it's all about how you frame it. I mean, the way people are, what I find interesting, particularly in San Francisco, because it's expensive to open a restaurant, a lot of people are starting with pop-ups. Mm-hmm. You know, they find a bar or something, they go, hey, we'll do the pop-up food service for you guys. There's a woman that does pot stickers. She's got her own little pot sticker thing, and her pot stickers are like, they aren't the same shape as everybody else's. And she's the pot sticker queen, and she's on Instagram. And whenever she shows up, 500 people swarm the restaurant because they want her pot stickers. Mm-hmm. So people are finding ways to prototype stuff and reduce the risk. Mm-hmm. But again, it's like, well, define what success looks like. You said, I'm starting at the bottom. Well, when I started my first company, we didn't have anything except some ideas and some people. We raised a bunch of money. We launched a bunch of products. We partnered with some big partners, and we ended up selling the company successfully. So I look at that and go, well, that was neat. Then I did another company. We did all the same things. And we failed. We ran out of money, and the product wasn't successful. And in both cases, I would say, I learned a ton. And it didn't really, the outcome, I would have preferred a better outcome, but it wasn't so much, I wasn't doing it because I wanted to make a lot of money. I was doing it because I thought this was a good idea. Yeah. And it's a little bit humbling when you find out not everybody else thinks it's a good idea. Yeah. Or other people have other ideas and they outcompete you, right? Mm-hmm. But I think the notion that this ladder exists, and that if you step off of it, you're somehow going back to the beginning of something, right, is a whole framework which you really want to examine, because you don't want to be on the ladder. If you're the person we're talking about, mm-hmm. you found out that the ladder's not working for you, mm-hmm. and that the way around this, you're not going to power through the problem. You're just going to go around the problem, which is perfectly valid, is to start thinking about other ways that might pull on other talents that you have that would just rejuvenate what you're doing. Most of the people who read the book mm-hmm. stay in the same job. Okay. And reframe why they're there and come up with a better reason for working, mm-hmm. and then go back to work, and they're pretty happy in the exact same job. Because they're not doing it for a false reason. They're doing it for something that they really believe in. Mm. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And that's actually an interesting point, because sometimes I wonder, when do you choose to move on? When do you choose to push through? Mm-hmm. And sometimes if you push through, you have a chance of really growing into the thing. You get better at it. You overcome a few challenges, and then you're like, oh, actually, I kind of like this thing. I'm pretty good at it. Yeah. I'm glad I stuck it through. I mean, for me personally, I've gone through some pretty dark times with this company and starting it up, and have at some points been like, well, we're just going to leave this and go back to California with my husband. Maybe that would be an easier solution. But kind of by sticking it through and realizing that, oh, actually, there is a different alternative, and it is possible. But how do you choose between like being resilient versus recognizing this is really not for me? I'm not happy. It's a genuine feeling. I need to move on.
Yeah, it's an important question. And we have a whole bunch of chapters in the second book called Don't Resign, Redesign. Because people quit too soon most of the times. And I'm talking about, I'm in a big company and I don't like my boss. People don't quit companies, by the way. They quit bosses. Right. All the research says it's not the company, it's the person you work for that you can't, for some reason, you can't create a relationship that's productive. Yeah. And so you quit. And I was talking to the chief learning officer of Deloitte, who put together Deloitte University for that big consulting company. And she had a rule that any of the high performance people that were on the high performance track and the management track, if they quit, she did the exit interview because she wanted to know why they quit. Mm-hmm. You're my high performer. We were grooming you for a partner and you just quit. What's going on? And 9 out of 10 times they quit for another job that she could have given them in the company if they had just asked. Right. So a lot of times, we get in this narrow view of like, it's just me, this boss I don't like, or this group I don't like. But the company's large, it's full of all sorts of opportunities. So we're big on either, there's 4 steps. You could reframe and reenlist, just change the reason you come to work. Mm-hmm. You can remodel the job a little bit, just move a few things around to get it to be more fit for your skills and strengths. Yeah. You can relocate. Like I used to do this in marketing. Now I'm doing this in the sales group, or now I'm used in the sales group. Now I'm over in the operations group. It's a whole new company in a way. It's a whole new, network of people to work with. Or you can actually, retrain yourself for something. And the highest level of figuring out how to fit in the company is retraining for new skills. But, reframing, remodeling, relocating or retraining are 4 ways of figuring out how, particularly if you're in a large company, a big company like a DBS or a Singtel or something, there's hundreds of jobs in there that might be good for you. Why would you quit, move to another company? We have no social network. Nobody trusts you yet. You have to build all that trust and network when you have that in the company you're in. So we prefer try to push through the problem and see if you can redesign your way into something that works.
Yeah.
No.
So you're not telling us all to quit and go become Balinese dancers?
No.
Okay.
I mean, as lovely as that might be, no.
Is there a tool that you have which helps us to identify what we're really good at so that we then have the confidence to go and say, actually, dear boss, I would like to recreate and I want to do this because actually I'm better at this.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of them. And one is, again, this is sort of, first you kind of have to know what you're good at. So we have you write a work view. What's work for? What do you work? What motivates you at work? And then we have you write what's we call a life view, which is really the meaning of life. What's that? 250 words or less. Put the two together. Figure out what parts are coherent, because there's a lot of research evidence that if you have a coherent view of why you work and how it lines up with your life values, that you experience your life is meaningful.
Yeah.
Just a little side note, I teach at Stanford. It's a research university. So I can't make stuff up. I'm not allowed to make stuff up. They would throw me off the faculty. And I'm only an adjunct anyway, so they would really throw me off the faculty. But no, so our stuff's pretty well grounded in the research around either human motivation or learning and learning styles and things like that. So you can take different assessments, Myers-Briggs, the strengths assessment from the Gallup organization, that give you a sense of what are you really good at on a job, and how can you apply that to, improving either your satisfaction or performance, which will also improve your satisfaction. So there's really practical stuff you can do.
What I liked about your book was that it was very conversational, so I felt like you were just talking to me. But I liked that in every chapter you gave us a practical exercise. Yeah. So as long as you just put in some time to actually do the homework, I felt like you were kind of there guiding us step by step.
Yeah.
Which was nice.
Thanks. That's the way we designed it. Every chapter starts with a dysfunctional belief. Like, it's too late for me. I'm 30 years old. I can't change. Like 100 examples of people who changed in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s to much better careers. They were much more successful. They made a lot more money. So it's never really too late. It's just a matter of how do you engineer the change, and then we give you an example of how to do it in an exercise. And when people are very kind. Nobody comes up at a book signing and says, "This book was a piece of crap. I want my money back." They all want it signed, and they're very polite. And I always ask, well, what was useful? What did you actually do? And the two things that show up all the time is this idea of reframing. Like, you mean I can change the problem and I can think about it a different way. And if that gives me more options and I try them and it's successful, then I'm not stuck with the old problem. So reframing, really big idea for people, which designers do all the time. It's just the way we think about, well, it's a glass, but I want to come up with a new glass. So it's not really a glass. It's a thing for holding water. No, it's not a thing for holding water. It's a spatial, collection device. And then we come up with a new thing and you have a new glass. The other one is prototyping. The idea is you can break down anything. You can prototype a party for your husband. You can prototype, a way to get your kids to do their chores. You can prototype, a new engagement in your life to see if there's any energy there or not. But if you start thinking like the mindsets of a designer, be curious. Just be curious about the world. The world is full of so many interesting things. Reframe the problem. Don't be stuck. Yeah. Just don't sit there trying to solve the problem over and over again. Reframe the problem. See it from a different point of view. Yeah. Zoom back a little bit. What's really going on? And then prototyping to lower the risk, do a little time traveling, meet some people who are already doing what you're interested in. Because the world's full of interesting people. And if you're, by the way, it's interesting. Once you become a curious person,
yes,
you're just more interesting. People want to talk to you. The folks who are really, and I have a tremendous sympathy for people who are really stuck in their jobs. Yeah. And they don't even have time to think about this stuff. They got kids, they got the job, they got the angry boss, they've got, they just don't see a way forward. And so our thing is like, take really, the whole science of behavior change is take really small steps, actionable steps, little prototypes that you can try stuff. You'll either have a win or not, but you'll learn something. So it's always a win if you learn something. And then you do another one and another one. And once you get moving, it's surprising how many options that were really right there. You just didn't see them.
Yeah.
And it takes a while. I mean, if you really want to change your job, I am a banker. Now I want to be a restaurateur. I was a restaurateur. I worked in the hospitality industry. Now I want to become a life coach. It's going to take some time, but you're going to do it in small incremental steps. And then you're going to discover what's the right way for you. Right?
I think when you're faced with a multitude of choices, you get this, the analysis paralysis, and you get a bit scared. I like the idea of, making it bite-sized, doing prototypes in small chunks, so that it's a bit more accessible. But how do you also deal with the fact that maybe you have too many choices and almost anything is possible? And I heard you talk about the Monet paintings. Yeah. And I kind of really like that story. Yeah, can you tell us about that?
So there's a bunch of research about choosing. One, you're right. If you have too many choices, you just decide not to choose. There's a famous experiment where they have, you go to a grocery store and there's a lady and she's got a little table and she's got 4 jams. Would you like to try a jam? Strawberry, grape, whatever. And when they run that experiment, they have people counting how many people walk by and don't stop, how many people stop, how many people buy jams. 4 jams, about 30% of people stop, about 30% of people buy jam. So 30% of 30, about 15%. Next week, 24 jams. Look at all these jams. More amazing. Jams. Bacon, strawberry, whatever. But lots of jams. In a case like that, twice as many people stop because look at all these jams. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
And almost nobody buys. Like 2% of the people buy anything. Because you can't make a choice when there's 24 jams.
Yeah, they couldn't pick.
You can't pick. It's just like if you have a retirement plan and you have 3 funds to invest in, the conservative, the medium, and the aggressive, you'll make a choice. But if you have 300 funds to invest in, you'll just decide not to choose.
Right.
So we have some tools for narrowing down and zooming in on what are the real choices that matter to you, because a lot of the options really wouldn't fit anyway. But you're overwhelmed with options. But then it turns out in the science of choosing, this guy Dan Gilbert at Harvard who studied this, he ran an experiment where basically people got to choose something. They had to rank how much they liked something, and they were using prints of Monet paintings, and they ranked them from 5 I liked a lot, or 1 I liked a lot, to 5 I didn't like it at all.
Okay.
And then they go, whoa, we happen to have number 3 and 4. We got some extras. Would you like one? Doesn't matter what you pick. They always have extras because that's actually not the experiment, right?
Okay.
And so most people say, well, I like number 3 more than 4, and they take it home. But he changes the experiment in one way. He says, okay, in one case, the graduate student who says, oh, we've got extra prints. You want one? If you take it, you have to keep it. Just go home. It's yours. We're done. First, and then the second situation is, yeah, you can take the print home. And by the way, if you change your mind and you want number 4, just come back. I'll give you the number 4. Mm-hmm. When you make the decision reversible, people aren't happy. They're not sure if they got the right one. Maybe they got the right one. Maybe they didn't get the right one. They don't know. Mm-hmm. When you make the choice irrevocable, like you picked it, it's done. They like it a lot.
They find a way to live with it.
They find a way to live with it. And then when they come back, he says, everybody come back and re-rank the photos again. Uh-huh. Now people that was number 3, they now rank it number 2 or number 1 because they like it a lot because it's theirs. They owned it, and they own the decision to make it, and it's not reversible. And so what we try to teach our students is, look, we're going to teach you lots of ways to have lots of ideas and come up with lots of options. We're going to teach you ways to narrow down to the options that actually matter, that are actually based on your values. Which of these really matter? Because you really don't need 24 jams. There's only like 3 or 4 that are worth choosing from. And then we're going to teach you how to make a choice irreversible, because it's about liking your choice, not about leaving options open. The goal of an option is to make a decision. Once the decision's made, you need to burn the boats and move on. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I know that makes people really anxious. Don't worry, because we taught you how to generate more options. So if 6 months from now, 9 months from now, turns out a bunch of things happen that you couldn't have predicted.
Yeah.
and you need to make another choice, we got a whole process for that. Don't worry.
Yeah.
You'll never run out of options. If you view yourself as a curious and creative person, coming up with more ideas, that's the easy part.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting because, again, we base all our stuff on psychological research that has been demonstrated to either help people make choices or help people be happy with the choices they make. And asking themselves questions that are pretty, designable kind of questions. Like I could try something and see what works.
Yeah.
Because after this, I'm going to go do a lecture at SMU. And they have a class where it's kind of the big questions class where they read a lot of philosophy and they read a lot of stuff. I saw the syllabus. It looks like a great class.
Yeah.
But I find that some people, you can read all this stuff and you kind of synthesize it in your mind and you go, okay, this is what I believe.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, you read ancient philosophers, Aristotle, Socrates, whatever. You read modern philosophers, Nietzsche and Kant, and then you read very modern stuff, and you're like, I'm still confused, because I think you can't own an idea by just reading about it. You got to try something, right, to really see if it works for you.
Yeah.
And design is a contact sport. You got to design stuff.
Yeah.
And that's
you got to
how
actually get your hands dirty and try it out.
Yeah. And so I think the other reason that people like the book is the stuff's easy to try.
Yeah.
It gives you surprising answers because it's pretty well. I mean, we taught the class for 8 or 10 years before we wrote the book, and we had lots and lots of students. We'd prototyped and changed things and tweaked things in pretty much. So,
I want to latch onto something that you said earlier, which is, okay, make your decisions irrevocable. Yeah. Maybe that's a way to be a bit happier about your choices. Now, one very irrevocable decision that a lot of us do is we get married. And I want to shift from careers to relationships because as you get older, obviously your relationships are a large source of stress for people. It could be a divorce. It could be you're still single. It could be with your parents. It could be with your children.
Right.
But of course, marriage is one that, that is irrevocable. So, or maybe it isn't. I don't know. I would love to hear your views on when you're dealing with more personal stuff.
Yeah.
How do you tackle that?
Yeah. When I'm not a marriage counselor. I had been married for 37 years very successfully, and I really love my wife. And it's always challenging in a relationship to keep the communication going and keep the, because I'm not the same person I was 37 years ago, and she certainly isn't the same person she was. And we've had 3 children, and they're all grown and often launched and doing well. So I think even in the case of highly consequential decisions, who do I marry? Do I stay in this job? What about having kids, and how many? And what's my responsibility as a parent? One, the mindset of curiosity. Like, you don't know when you have kids how it's going to go. So you have to stay curious. And I found, quite surprisingly, that I learned more from my kids, I think, than they taught me. I saw their personalities emerge from day one. I saw them, have completely, the three of them are so different from each other that just staying curious and not assuming what they need, and really having empathy for what the situation is, and having empathy for your partner, because your partner's changing and you're changing, and it's a dynamic system. One of the things I'm doing in the talk at the end of the week is there's sort of 3 models psychologists have for like what makes our life happy.
Yeah.
One model is what they call the hedonic model, a happy life, pleasure, order, pleasure, things happen, the way they're supposed to. You enjoy your life, and it's all about happiness and having things be predictable. Another kind of life is the kind of meaningful life, what they call a eudaimonic life. It's all about meaning and purpose and sacrifice and virtue and doing the right thing.
Yep.
But there's another theory that's been emerging lately. It's called the psychologically rich life, which I think is the designer's life. It's a life full of really intense experiences, really interesting, new stuff all the time. It's a life where things are complex, but you love deeply and you suffer deeply when bad things happen, and you feel alive in your life. I think Joseph Campbell, when Bill Murray was interviewing him, he said, everybody wants to know the meaning of life. And Campbell said, no, I think people just want to live with more aliveness.
Yes.
And to be in their life. Yeah. And so this unintentional, I got tracked into being I'm a lawyer because my dad said, I'm a doctor because my mom said, your mom and dad loved you, and they just said, hey, if if you did this, you would be successful, and that would be a good thing, and you would have enough money, and you'd be safe and secure, and you could have children and afford everything. But it doesn't work. Doesn't work. And I'm talking to a lot of that generation of Singaporeans, and they're saying, I've changed my advice to my kids. I'm telling them, don't do what I did.
Right. Okay.
Don't do what I did.
Yeah.
It's fine.
It takes an enlightened parent to say that.
Yeah, but they're saying, I sacrificed everything so that you guys could have the life you have. Mm-hmm. So now go have the life, that you want to have. And I think it is. It's an enlightenment that comes from the wisdom of living a life of, sacrifice and certainly a meaningful life. I like to study lots of historical figures. Mother Teresa, who set up this giant, place to take care of lepers and the poorest of the poor in India, in Bombay. By all accounts, she was depressed. She was unhappy most of the time. She's probably suffered from bipolar disorder or something, but nobody knew in those days what that was. And she would describe her life as miserable, except for she felt called by her God to do this work. Right. And so it wasn't about her. Yeah. It was about, what she was doing. She had a higher calling. She had a higher calling. It's so interesting. By the way, this is interesting. I found this out too. Everybody talks about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Mm-hmm. Safety and security, the highest of the hierarchy, step 5 is self-actualization. I need to actualize myself. I need to find who I really am. But in the last 3 years of his life, Maslow said, I got it wrong. There's another layer. There's a 6th layer, and it's self-transcendence. Okay. And that's what Mother Teresa was doing. She was transcending herself to create joy and care for other people. Yeah. And so I think what people, when parents get to be 50 or 60 and they see the kids going out and they see the stress they're under and all this stuff, and they're trying to repeat that narrative of money, success, climb the ladder. I think a lot of parents are saying, that was okay, but I don't want you to end up having the life I had. Yeah. And by the way, that was also, historically, you guys, I'm older than Singapore. I started in 57. You didn't start till 63, 65.
We're a young country.
I know, but you're a very young country. And it made sense for everybody to say, all right, this isn't about me. This is about, we have to build this thing. Yeah. This is a swamp. You have no water. You have no resources. And so the generations that created, the modern Singapore are amazing and deserve to be held in high esteem and praised for the sacrifice they made. But I'm running into lots of, 3rd or 4th generation Singaporeans who are saying, okay, well, we got this thing and we got lots of money and stuff, but like, what's next? Mm-hmm. And there's an emerging trend towards a more creative economy, an IP-based economy. You got to invent stuff if you want to stay at the top of the heap. You can't just do transportation, logistics, and banking. You have to build stuff. You have to make your own stuff. And so I think all that's coming together, and the reason I'm even in Singapore is that Mark Wee, who was running Design Singapore at the time, the government's program for creating innovation on the island and creative economy, called me up and said, hey, a bunch of people have told me about your book. I want you to do a workshop for us. So we did a workshop during COVID. We did it virtually, my lab at Stanford. And then a bunch of people said, we want to do this in Singapore because we think we are on this change. We're at this moment of change where we have to get to the creative economy. Yeah. But that can't be planned the way we've planned things because now things are more complicated and people want to have more joy and meaning in their life. Yep. Could you come and do this? And so we set up an institute. Mark is now the executive director of that institute with me, and we're trying to bring this to these classes to everybody. What is it called
and where will it be?
Well, it's called the Designing Your Life Institute of Singapore. It's a nonprofit company limited by guarantee in your system. I mean, it's somewhat virtual. We kind of operated out of the Warehouse Hotel where I stay.
Okay.
And things. But I mean, we're running classes and we have amazing partners. We're working with the Human Capital Leadership Institute, HCLI, Boris Stoneman's company, and they're taking us into corporates and into government. I just did a big program with the Enterprise Singapore Group, which is your government organization for small and medium business success. We're working with Republic Polytechnic, and we're working with Singapore Institute of Technology, and we're going to be working with other schools as well to help them teach the classes there. And so, yeah, we have lots of partners and lots of energy and excitement going on. We launched the institute in June of last year. So we're just getting going. We're a startup.
I sense this overwhelming demand and kind of all these different groups in Singapore welcoming you with open arms.
Including the Great Room, where we're going to do a talk tonight and some other things.
I feel like there's just so much energy around this. We're kind of at this tipping point where everybody's in that next phase where they're like, actually, my fulfillment, joy, that's important.
Yeah, and managing that around my obligations and the practical things in life. But everyone deserves, I just will argue, everybody deserves a little bit of creativity in their life, a little bit of joy in their life. Yeah, there's going to be hard stuff.
Yeah.
There's hard stuff in everybody's life, my life as well. But when you start thinking like a designer and you come from a place of curiosity and you're willing to reframe problems and see if you can solve them a different way, it doesn't always work, but it works a lot of times. And when you're willing to try little things to move the ball forward, and you know, you don't always have to just, you know, grit your teeth and deal with a bad situation. You can change it. You have the agency to change it. When the students take the class at Stanford, it's 10 weeks long, and the research results we've done, peer-reviewed research, says it increases their career self-efficacy. It lowers their dysfunctional beliefs. It increases their ability to have new ideas, to do novel ideation. When we do it in the wild with people in their 30s and 40s, and now we're going to try to do a program. Oh, you have an amazing library here.
Yes.
The National Library?
Yes.
Phenomenal. I love libraries. It's phenomenal. We're going to do a program with little micro programs out of the library. People can come to the library and take a program for free and just maybe learn one or two tools. But when you start to get thinking this way, it just opens up a lot more humanness in you, because people are naturally curious and creative. It's just, you know, sometimes we work so hard we forget.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to thank you for being here, sharing your insights with me and with all the listeners. Can we end with maybe another one of these?
Sure.
Just on a lighthearted note?
Yeah. Well, you sure it's going to be lighthearted? I don't know.
Oh, yeah, there's some serious ones in there. Okay. So you...
Ooh, looking back at the past year, what has been your biggest blessing in disguise? Past year. Well, you were talking about there was a period of time as you're doing this startup called The Great Room, which in Silicon Valley, we have a little chart that says every startup starts out with high expectations, and then it goes to what's called the Valley of Despair, right? Where like, nobody likes my idea. Nobody wants to give me money, you know, and hopefully you get out of that and And I think last year, you know, I had been flying here and trying to put this thing together, and I was spending a lot of my own money. And it was really, really quite difficult until, and I don't regret any of it. But then, like all of a sudden, Mark decided to join. A phenomenal reporter at the Straits Times decided to do a story about us, and then all of a sudden, you know, everything just started to come together.
Right. building
And we're still a startup, and we're still building the airplane while we're flying it.
Yeah.
But there was a period of time when I think my wife said, "You're not going to spend any more money on this, are you? You're not going to. How many times are you going to fly to Singapore?" And I was here last year. I'm actually ashamed to say I'm now a titanium member of the Marriott Bonvoy Club. I didn't know. I knew silver, gold, platinum. But if you spend 90 days, you know, in Singapore at the same place, you get to be a titanium member. So. That turned out to be a blessing in disguise. I have great friends at the hotel now, and they always give me the same room.
Amazing. So, well, we look forward to seeing more of you here. You're designing your Life Institute in Singapore. And thank you so much for joining us today, Bill Burnett.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah, it's been fun.
Yep.
Yeah.
You've just listened to the Greater Encounters podcast. This episode was produced, recorded, and edited by the team behind The Great Room. The Great Room by Industrious is co-working inspired by hospitality. With locations worldwide spanning across APAC, North America, and Europe, it is recognized as one of America's 500 fastest growing companies by Inc. magazine. The Great Room offers hyper-flexible workspace solutions to support a variety of unique office needs. Through community events and experiences designed to cultivate connections and amplify professional learning and development, we change the way you feel about coming to work. Greater Business Club by The Great Room is a next-generation business club for leaders building leaders. We facilitate an ecosystem of learning, collaboration, connection, and giving back. For more information on The Great Room, or if you would like to join the Greater Business Club community, head over to www.thegreatroom.co.